Hi, I'm Johnny Kincaid, and I want to welcome you to This Week in Evansville. We've been off for a couple of weeks as we kind of retool things from our former format of audio-only programming into the big world of video. And it just gives us an opportunity to expand our distribution network some in doing this. But the basic premise of the show remains the same, whether I've always been told I have a face for radio, so I was a little concerned about sitting down in front of a camera. But we'll do the same thing that we have been doing, which is talking about the things that really matter to people living in Evansville and Southwest Indiana. All right, this week I had the opportunity to go to the Meet Your Candidates event that took place at the Central Library. It happens once a month during the legislative session. It is a great opportunity for you to hear the legislators explaining why they support or don't support certain pieces of legislation. It's an opportunity for you to be able to share your view with the people that you hire to represent you in Indianapolis. And you can also get a chance to be educated about what bills are moving through the pipeline there as well. Now, I was a little disappointed in the turnout at the most recent Meet Your Legislators, much smaller than it was in February. Not desolate or anything, but quite a few empty seats, whereas in February it was a completely full house. And the biggest disappointment, I think, is just in who showed up from the legislative side. Because what the consistent pattern now has turned into is 3 legislators are consistently showing up for these events, and we're not seeing any of the other faces there. Jim Thomas deserves big credit for showing up. Vanetta Becker, state senator, she deserves big credit for showing up. And State Representative Ryan Hatfield, he also deserves big credit for showing up. Look, this is a sacrifice for these people. I understand that. But they made a sacrifice when they ran for the office. And once in office, of course, during the session, they're spending 4 days or so in Indianapolis. Then they come home for the weekend with their family, and they have all kinds of other events scheduled during that time as well. But look, the people deserve to see and hear from the folks that they have elected into those offices. So I just want to encourage our legislators to show up for these and face the folks who are there. I know that there's a tendency in these public hearings, too, to kind of get 2 polarized groups, right? And you've got one group that has a set agenda over here and another group that has a set agenda over here. And then it's easy to kind of feel trapped in the crossfire on that as the legislator being there. But it's really important to be heard. And the legislators who do show up, I thought Saturday that they were masterful at being able to deal with community comment, including when somebody stood up to talk about Jim Tom's bill that has passed the Senate and is now in the House. It's Senate Bill 12. This is a bill authored by Jim that deals with distribution of pornography and other harmful materials in school libraries. And, somebody got up and they just kind of took their entire time to express their opinion on this particular piece of legislation. And it wasn't friendly toward Senator Thomas. But here's how Jim replied to it.
We're not talking about classics. We're not talking about 1984, To Kill a Mockingbird, Grapes of Wrath. We're not talking about classical literature. We're talking about raw to the bone pornography that poisons the kids' minds. The image of a gun in a book is not going to do the damage and leave a lasting picture in the mind of a child as these books will. Because once their eyes see this, flashes that picture, they won't forget it. Sir, you can have your opinion, but there's other citizens in the state, they have their opinions. That's pornography. You will be arrested. In fact, 2 days before my bill was heard in committee, 2 days, just 2 days before, it was heard on Wednesday, That Monday prior, a teacher in Princeton, Indiana, was arrested in the school for showing the kids at high school up there in Princeton. Got a picture here in the story. She had a captive audience like we do. The kids have to go to school. They don't have to go to the library. They don't have to go to the movie. Parents want to give them one of these, that's fine. There's no control on that or a computer. But she had a captive audience of kids in the high school showing them a video of oral sex. I've got to ask, where's the benefit? We've got kids coming out of school right now that cannot write, can't write cursive, barely can print, because I get letters from them, and I think it's kind of sad that these young children can't write any better than that or print. We got college kids who will tell you that the two countries that border the United States is California and Massachusetts. So I'm telling you, sir, both of our kids here have no value. I would rather our kids learn something about geography or history, or go to the library and find books that will take them around the world to other countries and cultures where they can learn and experience what the rest of the world has to offer for them. Nothing like this will serve the benefit of a child, period.
I had a tendency to support this bill until it made felons out of school librarians. It is true.
That's what you're concerned about?
Yes, I am. I don't think librarians are felons, and I don't think we ought to be passing laws that make them felons. And I will also say this about this. If your child has a cell phone or a computer, they can find anything they want.
Yes, they can.
On a cell phone. That's right. They don't, you know, the parents ought to be responsible for what a child reads. This bill is already on the books. It's already on the books. I talked to legislative services. They said this really isn't anything new. It's already on the books. And if you have a concern about a book in a library, all you have to do is go to the school board, to the principal, to the superintendent, and they'll take care of it.
The school board has to listen. Your school board has to listen to you.
Absolutely.
They won't.
They're
They
listening.
don't. Well, I disagree.
All right, Representative.
Yeah, and I'm going to leave somebody out, but I think I may be the only person in the room who has prosecuted dissemination of pornographic materials. So let's just talk a little bit about that. It is on the books. It has been a law for a very long time. I've prosecuted cases involving the dissemination of pornographic material. And I think that the bill as it stands adds more government into local processes that Senator Becker has already correctly acknowledged already exist. We have 200 and some odd school boards and systems in the state of Indiana. 0 of them are asking for this, and all of them have a process to deal with these materials between teachers, parents, and school administrators in the appropriate method that community already decides. Let's let locals decide what is in their schools and what's being taught to their children. And if you have a complaint about the school board, run for school board or elect people who you want to be on the school board. Unfortunately, for those of you who are unhappy with the school board, I hate to tell you, they're elected by the people of this community, and they continue to get elected, and the process already exists and it's working. Let's let that work. I said last time, the era of small government in Indiana is over, and we need to rein in this big government. We know what's best ideal that has plagued the Indiana State House.
I want to bring you back to that last line of Ryan's again here. I want you to pay attention to what he says one more time, to listen carefully to what Hatfield has to say here in his last line of his statement.
The era of small government in Indiana is over, and we need to rein in this big government. We know what's best ideal that has plagued the Indiana State House.
Ryan's talking about big government, right? Ryan's a Democrat. Ryan and I ran for state representative for the same seat that he's in now at the same time. I don't ever say that I ran against Ryan, because I didn't see it as running against Ryan. I saw it as running for more conservative principles in that particular race. And Ryan and I got along just fine on the campaign trail. And maybe if you know Ryan, you should call him and say, I'm on here agreeing with him 100%. And he even said in the first Meet Your Legislators that I went to, he said the Republicans are ushering in the era of big government again. And I agree with him there. The party has started moving away from those basic principles of small government and less intrusion into our lives, and they're leading the charge on a lot of this stuff that government doesn't need to be poking its nose into. We need less government, not more. This legislative session, by the way, we have a supermajority in the House and the Senate of Republicans, and we have a Republican in the governor's office. And Indiana is in better shape, I would say, than a lot of states are, as far as economics go and policy as well. But we still kind of keep creeping in the wrong direction here. And the truth is, at the beginning of this legislative session, there were 1,000 bills that were up for consideration, 1,000 laws regulating what you and I can do. 1,000. I mean, that's a lot of regulation. Now we've narrowed it down, and it's down in the hundreds now. Oh boy. But still, that's a lot of new laws and new regulations coming into play here in the Hoosier State. And some of what we see going on with this expansion of big government and everything is just plain and simple seeking of power. And that's where I get really frustrated, all right? Because we're hearing less in campaigning about here's what I can do, and we're hearing more about here's what the party needs. And we've got to back off from that. I mean, I do lean right. I do believe in a more conservative approach to things, but I don't want it to be about the party having enough power to do things. I think that we need to be working together. There has to be some give and take, and there has to be people on both sides that are willing to get together and hash things out and come up with reasonable solutions to the problems that we have and agree to keep our hands off of the things the government doesn't need to do. We've got enough problems brewing without legislating even more problems. And we, as voters, it's our job to keep an eye on these guys, to make sure that they are doing their job, that they are representing us, that they are passing legislation that's going to benefit us and not hurt or punish sectors of the population. So there's my pet peeve. I've kind of had this going on a national basis, probably more than anything, because of the fact that I think on the national level, Mitch McConnell has done a horrible job. We have had poor leadership, and we keep fighting over power instead of trying to attract people with good, solid principles. And forget about the power plays. The National Party keeps trying to fund everything enough to put big money into some really crazy races, and we're spending huge amounts for political power. So I get phone calls now on a regular basis. I made the mistake of contributing to the National Republican Party years ago, and now I get phone calls on a regular basis. And the National Republican Committee is calling to get me to donate again. And I keep telling them I won't. I've told them not one more dime. That as long as Mitch McConnell is in power, there's no way I'm ever going to contribute to the party. And even with that, there's still going to be further need for change in leadership so that the party gets back on its track of getting government out of our way and let us live our lives and keep our money. Let individual Americans spend on what they want to spend money on. And those concepts seem to be lost even on some prominent Republicans. It's time that we've got to make some changes there. And that'll be a huge impact on Evansville as well as everywhere else in the country. All right, so let's talk about some of these other news stories that we've got taking place around the Evansville area here. The closing of Harwood School. There's been some protests about it at the last school board meeting. The decision was made without any public comment, and that's where a lot of people are having a problem with this, is because the school corporation said that it was a personnel issue, and so thereby they didn't need to hold any kind of meeting in public. In the legislative session, lots of things are moving, lots of things that you've got to watch out for. One of the things to kind of keep an eye on is how bills are being presented to the public by the media. You know, the wording that's chosen for talking about certain bills, because every bill that deals with LGBTQ issues is showing up as hate legislation. And I mentioned earlier that Vanetta Becker voted against SB 12. Well, she voted against another one of the Senate bills that's been up for this in this legislative session that has passed from the Senate into the House, and that is the bill that deals with prohibiting anyone from doing medical procedures on minors for the purpose of a sex change. Now, all of the news headlines are saying that they refer to it as an anti-LGBTQ bill, and they refer to it as hate legislation. And all it is simply a matter of protecting minors in this case from doing something that's irreversible. It's a permanent mutilation, and they might change their mind a few years down the road. Let them do it, but do it in adulthood. And this idea of calling that gender-affirming surgery, when what it really is a sex change operation. The media is continuing to feed us with a slanted view of the legislation. So just be aware of that when you see the wording. Just be aware that it's slanting the perception of that particular bill. And there is another side to it, and there are people who believe that the best, most affirming thing that we can do is, yes, provide counseling, and yes, provide ways that we support the mental well-being of that young person, but stop short of the full-on physical transition. Right? More on that, I'm sure, is going to be to come. And then finally, we're going to talk just for a second here, because this is really a plug for what we're going to talk about next week on the show, because we're going to get Rob Myers back on the show next week, and Rob's going to talk about the mayoral race in Evansville. Now, here's the deal. We've got a law in Indiana. The law says that for a person to qualify to run for an office under their party, meaning to run like in the primary, they have to have voted for their party in the last two primaries that they voted in, right? So in other words, if they're going to run as a Republican, which Kane Helmer was the guy who decided to run as a Republican in Evansville for mayor, They looked at his voting record, and he didn't have 2 primaries where he drew a Republican ballot. So thereby, they disqualified him from making the run. In the meantime, on the Democrat side, Brian Alexander he decided to run, had his name on the primary ballot. The party looked at his voting record, and he had voted in 1 primary as a Democrat, but not 2. So he was disqualified. Kane Helmer, by the way, on the Republican side, had not voted in a primary at all. Young guy, hadn't voted in a primary yet. And some people are saying that this law is unconstitutional because if you're 21 years of age, you can run for state representative, but if you're 21, you would not have gotten the opportunity, possibly, to vote in 2 primaries. So it's kind of making it tough there, guys. And this law has been used all over the state, taking names off the ballot, and it's become cause for a big rally in Indianapolis about it, and a lot of people looking at whether the law is constitutional or not. It's certainly going to make for continuing interest in the mayoral race here in Evansville. No word on what Brian Alexander is going to do now that he's been taken off from the Democrat side. But on the Republican side, Kane Helmer originally said that he was going to run as an independent if he was disqualified as a Republican. So there's a possibility that the general election field could get pretty crowded because there is also a Libertarian candidate coming up, and they have until July, I think it's right around July 23rd or so, for the Libertarians to be able to add a candidate onto the general election ballot. Same thing with an independent candidate. So it's going to be an interesting season. What we do have is 2 ladies running for mayor in Evansville on the Republican ticket. That would be Natalie Rasher and Cheryl Musgrave, and 1 running on the Democrat ticket, which is Stephanie Terry. In fact, on the Democrat side, I don't know that there are going to be any contested races there in the primary. On the Republican side, there will be at least a contested seat running for mayor, and I think that may be the only contested office running there. But it's going to be a great run for it as far as mayor goes. We'll be working on getting Cheryl and Natalie and Stephanie all to come into the studio and do shows with us in the near future. In the meantime, Rob Myers here next week. Be sure that you subscribe so that you can continue to get all the latest from us here on This Week in Evansville.